and commercial real estate forecast. I'm Jamie Stiles. No, I'm not. Jamie wasn't able to make it. Thank you guys so much for being able to make it here. It's been challenging this week. Just so thankful that you took the time and energy and effort to get here. I'm John Potvin, Managing Director of Colliers International West Michigan. Proud to be here to represent the team and the top commercial real estate and property management group in all of West Michigan. On behalf of the entire team, I want to thank you for joining us today. Whether this is your first time in attendance or the 19th in attendance, we're privileged and honored to have you here. I want to take a special moment to recognize the music talent that was joining us today. Asamu Johnson and the Associates of the Blues for their morning's great entertainment. Let's give them a round of applause. And a special recognition to Colliers' very own Adam McMillan. Please step forward, Adam. Adam had background vocals and played the keyboard. Thank you very much, guys. Before we begin, I want to thank our talented marketing and research team for putting this all together. The advisors, the staff, everybody in our team work really, really hard to put on a great show every year, and we try to outdo each other each year. So we're so thankful for them and all their efforts over the past couple months, but really this is a year-long planning cycle. So thank you all very much for everything you've done today. This forecast event can't happen without some amazing sponsors. I want to first off thank our platinum sponsor, First National Bank of Michigan, and their entire team and support for making this year's event happen. I also want to recognize a few of our other top sponsors, Ashley Capital, Chicago Title, and Downtown Grand Rapids, Inc. Now please enjoy this short video from our platinum sponsor, First National Bank of Michigan.
We've worked with First National Bank since they were founded in 2006. It was great to have a community bank back in the Kalamazoo community. People that really know you and understand what your company's about and the people that you're working with. There's a lot of trust going both ways in that relationship.
We've known the folks at First National Bank for quite some time. We like it when bankers try to understand our business. It's about the relationships that we have together, and it's not just about the numbers, but it's more important that our relationships are well-founded.
When we work with our clients, we consider it a collaborative approach. You know, there's a lot of satisfaction in meeting with someone and hearing their vision, hearing their dream, and being able to be a part of making that come true.
We needed to roll together a lot of properties and combine some loans that we had with the new Bay Point Woods expansion. As a result, it was a complicated deal to put together, and First National Bank just seemed to have the best appetite for the transaction. And as a result, we established a relationship not just from a lending standpoint, but we transferred all of our banking over to First National Bank.
Every financing opportunity is different. No two deals are alike, and we have to be able to creatively figure out a way to finance a project, or as well as take care of the treasury management needs of our diverse client base.
We at Gillespie Group are really focused on doing creative projects in unique areas that aren't always easy to do. The reason we choose to use First National Bank of Michigan is that they are a Michigan-based community bank, and the people you're talking to are the decision makers. You're actually having conversations with people that are responsible for making decisions, so you're not going to a separate board or a separate committee to find out what the status of your loan is.
The community banking space is much more personalized. It's much more attentive to the client needs. You train your staff to listen to what the needs are, and the good news is we have a really experienced team of people here that know what they're doing.
Business doesn't stay static. It's a dynamic financing world that we live in, and that helps set us apart in the financial service industry. Remember, at First National Bank of Michigan, together we are first.
thank you, First National Bank of Michigan, for being our platinum sponsor this year. It's an honor to be part of a leading global real estate company like Colliers here. If you didn't know this, Colliers today is the fastest growing commercial real estate firm in the world. In 2017, Colliers corporate overall had revenues of $2.3 billion. And globally, Colliers has offices in 69 different countries with over 13,000 employees. Here locally in the state of Michigan, we have 4 offices covering kind of the lower part of Michigan. Starting on the east side of the state, we have an office in Southfield, an office in Ann Arbor, and the west side of the state is headquartered here in Grand Rapids, as well as having a great office in Holland, which serves the lakeshore. We have, overall on the west side of the state, we have 27 advisors that work in the 4 different specialty groups, investment, industrial, office, and retail, as well as on the investment side serving the multifamily sectors. We have some exciting news to announce today. As some of you may have met him already, but Steve Poole is joining us as of early this year. Steve Poole is a commercial real estate veteran. He used to work for Grubb & Ellis back in the day, but he's lived in Traverse City for a number of years, and he's now going to be our first Colliers advisor serving Traverse City and the northern Michigan market. So we really believe through this strategic hire that we have the entire state of Michigan covered to serve your real estate needs. Last year, our office here in Grand Rapids completed 468 transactions, totaling as far as properties go, that totaled over 7.5 million square feet and over $260 million worth of transaction volume. Our property management team, as I mentioned before, leads this area as well. Today, they manage 64 buildings, which equates to over 8.3 million square feet under management. Over the last 19 years, we brought together top real estate experts and researchers who work their tail off to spot economic trends and things that may change the future here of real estate. On behalf of Colliers, I want to sincerely thank the Seidman College of Business and Grand Valley State University for their active support and participation in this event throughout the years. We hope this event is beneficial to you and that you'll gain insight and knowledge about what's happening now and what's going to be happening in the near future. Now, please help me welcome Dr. Paul Isley, Associate Dean of Undergraduate Programs in the Seidman College of Business at Grand Valley State University. Dr. Isley has worked within Grand Valley State for the past 24 years, earning his PhD at Purdue University, and has been a very integral part of this event for the past number of years. Let's all give him a round of applause.
Good, thank you. Excellent. Thank you. So I got 2 applauses. That's pretty good for an economist. So, click. All right. So my job is to walk you through the economy this year. And I want to ask you a quick question. Do you have a good year? Do you have a good year again this year? Let's see some hands. Okay. Are you getting worried about next year or the coming year? Anybody? Yeah. Those of you who didn't raise your hand are lying because you drove through a massive snowstorm to see an economist. You know, let's think about it. All right? So let's walk you through what we see for the coming year and the things that you need to watch out for. I always start by telling you where we were accuracy-wise last year. And so here you can see a graph that shows what my predicted level of employment growth in West Michigan was. Those are the 2 bars. And what the actual growth was, which are the dots. We still don't have this year done. So once it gets done, hopefully we will move back into range. But the only year that we got really wrong was 2013, and everybody got 2013 wrong. So we've been doing pretty good accuracy-wise. We also told you you'd have price pressures this year. We also told you that you'd have to start paying your workers more this year. We also told you that you'd start worrying about the economy as you got to the end of the year. So that's what I told you last year. So let's look at this year, okay? We want to start with the theme, and the theme this year is the current conditions are facing headwinds. There's lots of things that could cause us to slow down as we move into the current year. And I'm going to deal with that by walking through 3 sets of questions for you. Okay, the 3 questions this year are going to be what is telling us that the economy is crested, why we think Grand Rapids will outperform the U.S. economy as the economy slows, and the things you have to watch out for this year. All right? So let's start with what are the indicators that show the economic wave has crested? We start with confidence. So every year, Seidman surveys business leaders across West Michigan. And when I say West Michigan, I mean Kent, Ottawa, Muskegon, and Allegan counties. All right? We survey those business leaders about many things. And one of those things is confidence. What I want you to see here is although confidence remains very high, for the first time since the Great Recession, we've had a drop in confidence by business leaders in West Michigan. It was a sizable drop, and business leaders were more pessimistic than governmental leaders at this point, which normally happens first. Business leaders see things sooner because they're in the trenches. All right? So this tells me that there's a good chance that we've crested. All right? So let's walk through a few national economy pieces so that we can see that. Remember, the national economy is important to us in West Michigan because we still are about a quarter of our economy is manufacturing. We're making stuff for the rest of the country. And if the rest of the country slows down, our economy slows down here. All right? So we've walked through this graph now for several years, but I will talk about it again for you here. What you can see is the orange line is the potential GDP of the U.S. economy. When the economy is stronger than that, we start to have bottlenecks in the economy that slow things down, like not being able to find labor, having to pay too much for steel, finding it harder to borrow. All right? And that's important because as we look through time, nearly every time, with one exception, when we have crossed potential GDP firmly, we've had a recession 18 to 24 months later. All right? If you look at that circle up in the upper left-hand corner, you can see we crossed potential GDP late last year, early this year. All right, I mean, early 18. I'm still thinking of it as 18. We're in 19, right? All right, so late 17, early 19. All right, that puts us with a recession probability somewhere starting the second half of 19 through the first half of 2020. All right, I want to be very careful here. Economists are really bad at calling recessions, so I want you to remember that. And if I knew exactly when the next recession was going to happen, I wouldn't tell you. I'd make bets, make a lot of money, and retire. All right? But I do want to say that we're primed and ready for the next recession, and that next recession is closer than you want. All right? Why do we know that? Remember that next recession happens because of bottlenecks. So what are the bottlenecks that we're seeing? Every year I have to have a complicated graph so you know that I'm smart and that I got my PhD. So here's my complicated graph for the year. What this graph is doing is giving you 2 different pieces of information. The little blue thing on the bottom with the bumps, when there's a bump, there's a recession. So it tells you when the recessions are. All right? The orange line what it tells you is the percent of real productivity growth that's going into compensation. So we're looking at how much of that increase in output is going to labor. All right? If it's above 1, more than 100% of that growth is going to labor. So if you look here at the end, where we have been for the last year, more than 100% of the growth, the value of that growth, is going to labor. But you're saying, wait a minute. I haven't seen wage growth that's really crazy yet. And there's a reason for that. All of you know how you pay. Wages are one piece, compensation is a piece, but what's started to grow greatly in the U.S. economy is non-monetary compensation. Extra vacation time, flexibility in your work schedule, being able to work from home. All those things make workers happier, but all the latest research tells us it doesn't make them more productive. It makes them less productive. One of the dirty little secrets about offices is we have offices to make people bored enough to actually work. All right? So, what do we see? The reason that has jumped up is because of that non-monetary piece combined with the monetary piece. All right? Why is this important? Look at the bumps. Every time you see a bump in the 50s, in the 60s, there's a bump there in the 70s that doesn't accompany an increase in this measure. That's when the oil crisis happened, so it didn't really matter. And then as you go over, every single time you end up with a recession in the near future. So where are we now? Much higher. You're sounding more pessimistic now. So wages are going up faster, but so is non-monetary compensation, and it's going up faster than the value being created by those workers. All right? The other bottleneck are inputs. So I'm going to measure that just looking at input prices. And here you can see input prices, the prices businesses pay, are going up faster at a higher rate than what you can charge your customers. So that squeezes profit margins, and it really results in a slowdown. All right? And the last constraint, since I know there are a lot of bankers and finance folks in the audience, is, of course, money. And I couldn't do any of these without a yield curve at least once when I have finance people in the office. All right? And what you can see here is when that short-term interest rate goes above the long-term interest rate, we get what's called an inverted yield curve. And that's where the graph goes down each year. All right? When there's an inverted yield curve, we tend to have a recession. All right? The story behind this is banks make money by borrowing money at the short-run rate, lending it to you at the long-term rate. So if they have to borrow it for a higher price than they can lend it at, their desire to lend to you goes down. All right? What we can see is parts of the yield curve inverted at Thanksgiving time. This larger part of the yield curve is almost inverted now. That tells me we're close to a recession. So workers are getting more expensive, inputs are becoming more expensive, it's getting harder to find the money that you need to finance your deals. That tells me we're close to the next recession. So, there's the bad news. Here's the good news. We continue to believe that Grand Rapids is going to outperform the U.S. economy as we move into this slowdown. And it's going to be a shallow slowdown. At least that's what we're seeing right now. And in some areas, it may just be a slowdown and not a recession. Other areas, it might be a recession. So why is Grand Rapids going to outperform? First of all, we already know what sales have been booked for the coming year. And when we talk to business leaders, they confirm that. And so what we can see is that business leaders are still expecting sales growth on the order of 2 to 3% for the year. And a lot of that's baked into the first half already. We already know what businesses are going to sell. So we can tell already that there's going to be sales growth across West Michigan. That's going to happen no matter what. All right? But more importantly, we have a talent thing. Everybody talks about the talent thing, and talent is very important right now. But this is employment. So as you look at employment here, I have two lines. The orange line is the long-term trend, and the blue line is the short-term trend. If you made the economic club dinner lunch on Monday, he went through all the mathematics on this. I'm not going to do that today. But all you have to know is if the blue line is above the orange line, growth is increasing. If the blue is below the orange, it's slowing down. So last year when we were talking to you, things were slowing down a little bit as far as employment growth. Right now, they're picking up a little bit, which is a little crazy because right now there are somewhere between 10 and 20,000 viable workers looking for work in West Michigan right now, which is nowhere near enough to satisfy demand for growth. So what do we see? We see employment growth. We see those businesses now that no businesses are really talking about really fast employment growth anymore. They're talking about employment growth, but they're talking about it in that 0 to 2% range. Those people who were thinking about 3%, they're gone. Those people who are thinking about 0%, they're gone. Most people are thinking about steady growth at about the rate of their sales growth this year. But we're out of workers. How can they do that? The workforce. If we look at the change in the workforce for Grand Rapids area compared to Michigan or the United States, we've outperformed. All right? And you see that bump for this year, that change last year, where we increased the workforce here, even though the workforce in Michigan didn't increase? That was completely immigration into the Grand Rapids area. It's people from other counties in Michigan, people from other states, people from other countries moving to Grand Rapids. And our entire labor force growth last year was that. That's a little scary. It means that we have to continue to attract workers from other places in order to grow here in Michigan. The other thing that we have going for us is a young workforce in the Grand Rapids area. So if we look at Grand Rapids, unlike any other area around here, there are more people between the ages of 25 and 35 than over the age of 65. That's a big deal because remember, those millennials are what are going to drive our economy for the next 20 years. All right? We're also seeing relatively fast growth right now in that age group. Much faster than anything else we see in the area or in Michigan. But there's a cloud on the horizon. Those millennials are almost done, and we're almost to Generation Z working workforce. All right? And you'll notice that those Generation Z numbers amount to basically a 1% drop in your graduating class every year for the next 10 years. Those are your new workers coming in. That is really getting sucked up. What happened was Michigan had a recession that went from basically 2000 to 2011. We were the only state that had a recession that basically lasted that long. Generation X people left to find jobs. They had their kids someplace else. All right? The good news is they want to move back. So we're seeing them move back, and we're now seeing net migration numbers positive from places like Houston and Denver, which is much different than what we saw 10 years ago as everybody was moving there. All right? So why are we going to do better? Because right now, the types of jobs we have, the amenities to life that we have, and the tireless work of many of our organizations here are leading people to want to move here. And as long as we can continue that, we will continue to grow faster than the rest of the U.S. economy. So my last question, my third question, what are the important indicators to watch this year? So in Grand Rapids, one of the things that I continue to hear people ask me about is residential real estate. Since there's going to be tons of stuff on commercial real estate, I'm not going to talk about that at all. There's smarter people here than me on that. All right? But what about residential? We see lots of cranes. Are we overbuilt? One of the things I want you to see here is that the growth in families is growing essentially just as fast as our growth in housing units. And there's a gap between the two. So we haven't caught up to that gap yet. So right now, what we're seeing is that the building that you're seeing around to create new apartments and houses is just keeping up with population growth. That's a very healthy number. All right? And we can further see that as we look at the residential vacancy rates, where you can see here in Grand Rapids, the vacancy rate for rentals has remained at about 4%, well below the national average for this type of city. We'd expect it to be closer to 7 or 8%. And you can see that the homeowner vacancy rate is basically zero for all intents and purposes. You know that if you've tried to buy a house recently. So what do we see on the housing front right now? We see weakness at the top of the market, strength in the bottom of the market. Why? Because we got a lot of millennials coming in. All right? That strength in the bottom of the market will keep those prices from eroding much as we move into the next recession. All right? Second thing we want to look at is trade. And I'm going to come back to trade in just a moment. But I want you to understand that there are a lot of concerns around trade right now. And I want you to understand that there are 3,273 entities that exported last year from this side of the state. And that's not going across a bridge to Canada. That's putting it on a boat going someplace else. And that amounts to about $60 billion across the state, or about $5 billion here in West Michigan. Any problems that we have with exports affect 1 in 9 workers here in Michigan. It's not as much as automotive, but it's a big number. And then we have taxes. So remember we had that big tax law change that we were talking about last year at this time? That did a nice expansion for us last year. It added about a percentage point to our overall growth in the U.S. economy. Most of that happened in the second and third quarters. Some of it will happen in the fourth quarter. But that sugar rush is gone. So what's left? The reason that the tax law change happened was because there was a desire to improve businesses' ability to invest. The thought process was if we lower businesses' taxes, they will see a windfall that they will use to reinvest in their companies, and that will create growth in the economy. So what do we see? This is business equipment investment, smooth annual growth. You can see at the end of 17, it crashed. Why did it crash at the end of 17? They all know the tax law was changing. Let's not invest at the end of 17 when we can get tax benefits in 18. And you can see it come back. But it hasn't gone past where we were before, and it's barely filled in the hole that we had before. So at this moment in time, we're not seeing businesses invest more. They are buying back their stock. They are going on an M&A spree, but they aren't investing in their firms. They should be. They have more money to do it. So why not? And here's the key word for this year, uncertainty. All right? Uncertainty. Those trade issues mean for manufacturers, they have no idea what the supply chain is going to look like in 2 years. If you don't know what the supply chain is going to look like, do you invest in a factory in a particular location? No. You wait until you know what it's going to be and when the dust settles. What about government shutdowns? Well, the government shutdown that we had really won't affect growth for the year. It might shave a few points, a few 0.1 or 0.2 off of growth for the first quarter. But it won't affect the year as a whole. But what it does do is it interjects uncertainty. It makes businesses say, uh-oh, our governmental leaders don't know what the heck they're doing. And when I talk to businesses who send their leaders to Washington to talk to leaders, they come back and tell me, uh-oh, they don't know what they're doing. That uncertainty tells business leaders, I better wait. Because I'm not sure the government's going to be there to support me if things go wrong. And I'm not going to take the risk. So what have we done? We've gone through 3 things for you. We've talked about why we believe the slowdown is coming. The slowdown is coming because we are finding constraints in labor, inputs, and money. We've told you that Grand Rapids will likely outperform. It will likely outperform because we have labor and we have people who want to come here to do labor, and we have lots of young people. As a result, we should outperform. And third, we said the things to watch for this year. Be watching for an increase in investment. Be watching for uncertainty to go away by trade deals happening. Watch for the fact that I don't believe that we're going to have really, in any real terms, any more interest rate hikes this year. Maybe 25 basis points up or down, but we don't really expect any more this year. By the way, we told you that last year, that there wouldn't be a lot this year. So as we got here, what do you need to do? Prepare for the fact that your interest rates are near peak. All right? That should not color your investment decisions as you go forward. You're going to see continued compensation pressure this year. The labor market's still tight. We're not drawing people in fast enough, and you're going to see that happen. You're going to have a smaller, less qualified worker pool. I had a guy at a recent presentation stand up and say, Paul, I can find workers, they just don't want to work. Yeah, you know, it's not true for everybody who's unemployed, but if you're in the last 20,000 unemployed people in the workforce in West Michigan, there's a high probability you're there because you don't want to work well, you can't work well, you don't have the skills, or you have skills that other people don't want. What do you need to plan for? I think that we will have a light recession. I think that light recession will affect the rest of the country more than here in Grand Rapids. I think it will happen in the next 18 months. I could be wrong on that, but I think it will probably happen in the next 18 months. Even if it doesn't, it's 24 months or 36 months. We're really close, and you should be doing the same things. Okay? So you should plan for taking advantage of a short, shallow recession. You do that by protecting the workers that you need to keep. You do that by making sure that you know what skills gaps you have now so you can get those workers when that worker slack happens. And you think about having cash on hand to take advantage of acquisitions you can make because your competitors didn't think that way. So if you don't believe me about there being a recession coming in the near future, when they survey economists, the average economist talks about 2020 being the next recession. When they survey CFOs, chief financial officers, they're talking about the recession happening by the end of 2019. Which of those two groups could actually cause the recession to happen? The economists or the CFOs? So on that happy note, have a good year. It'll be a very good year for the first part, and be prepared for the second half. Thank you. Am I introducing? Okay.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Bob Bach. I am going to cover for you today the national commercial real estate market conditions, what to look for. I'm also going to touch a little bit on the economy. I don't want to repeat what Paul has said, but maybe relate that a little bit more to commercial real estate. And I'm going to set the stage for your local speakers to come up in a few minutes and talk about what's happening in West Michigan. So my qualifications are, I'm the former head of research for a commercial real estate company called Newmark Knight Frank, and before that, Grubb & Ellis, which is how I came to know the people here at the local Colliers office in Grand Rapids, which used to be affiliated with Grubb & Ellis. We figured out that the last time I was here was actually in what was it, 2009, which was right after the financial crisis that led to the Great Recession, that triggered the Great Recession. And people were not feeling good at that point about the future economy. And I do remember Duke Sewin coming up here, and who's, of course, many of you know, is an executive in the local office of Colliers, coming up and talking about the strength of manufacturing in Grand Rapids and how that was going to really help power the economy through the downturn. Indeed, that did happen. Grand Rapids has a very strong manufacturing base. So I was always impressed with that. I used to travel around quite a bit. I'm retired now. I live over in Chicago. I've been retired for a year and a half. And every time, about this time of year, I think, I used to go to all those forecast events, and it was really fun. And I always used to come here to Grand Rapids, and I was always so impressed with the turnout and with the format. One of the largest of the forecast events that the Grubb & Ellis system and now the Colliers system have going. So I think that's a tribute to the local business community here and interest for information. So let me run through some of these slides. I'm going to go through them fairly quickly here for you. And that would be me. Okay, and again, go through them fairly quickly. We had GDP of about 3% in 2018, which was quite high, and as Paul mentioned, it was due to the sugar rush. Most economists are forecasting a return baseline to the 2 to 2.5% range at the US level going forward. Public debt. This is an issue because growth is returning probably to the 2.5% range, and because of the tax cuts that were enacted in December of 2017 and really affected growth in 2018, we have debt as a ratio to gross domestic product going up, even during this strong recovery that we've seen in the strong growth in 2018, which means that when we have a recession, debt is going to increase even more. So at some point, the U.S. will have to do something about that, officials, and I call it an orphan problem because the Republicans talked about the debt issue when the Democrats were in office, but when they got in, they enacted the tax cut, and that has exacerbated the debt problem. So nobody in Washington, it's not fun to face up to this issue. It's like, eat your oatmeal, but it has to be done sooner or later. Inflation, and I'm interested to hear Paul's talk about the constraint on labor inputs and other business inputs because inflation still is relatively low. The measure that the Federal Reserve looks at to judge inflation is right around their target rate of 2%. It's been below that for a couple of years. So there's not really, these input constraints that Paul mentioned, and they're very real, are not really showing up yet in actual inflation numbers, which is probably a good sign. And the target federal funds rate, you can see going back to before the Great Recession that began in December 2007, the federal funds rate was actually above 5%. Now it is just above 2%, and it may or, we may or may not be done raising, the Fed may or may not be done raising rates this cycle. So that's a good news. That would be a positive to look at in terms of whether or not to gauge whether we're headed for a recession in the near term. And finally, unemployment's very low, which translates into the labor constraints that Paul was talking about. So recession in 2019, 4 possible triggers. One would be rising interest rates, and hopefully we're done with that for this cycle, or maybe there'll be 1 or 2 more. But the Fed has been sounding very dovish about that. Bubbles, which really have triggered the last 2, possibly 3 recessions, with residential mortgages in 2007, 2008, and with with the tech bubble in 2000, 2001, and even before that in commercial real estate with the good bad days, the bad old days is what I'm trying to say, of the Resolution Trust Corporation back in the late, or rather the early 1990s. High oil prices, that's not really an issue now, and part of that is because we have the shale oil production going on, and policy mistakes, as Paul mentioned, things like the tariff or government shutdown, trade wars, and so forth. So, we'll see if this happens, but I was really encouraged with what Paul said. The next recession is likely to be short and shallow. That's something encouraging, certainly not like the Great Recession that we experienced. So now, commercial real estate has been doing phenomenally. If you look at the office market, I'll show you 4 graphs here, and they all look somewhat like this. The green bars are net absorption, the blue bars are space completions, and then the blue line there, that is the vacancy rate. So generally, when absorption is higher than completions, the vacancy rate goes down. I'm going to show you 4 graphs here, 1 for each of the major property types. This is office, and some key points here. Vacancy rate ended the 2018 very low, actually below 10%, which is pretty phenomenal. That is an 11-year low. It declined by 40 basis points in 2018. Suburban vacancy rate declined to a 17-year low. And the gap between downtown CBD, Central Business District, vacancy rates and suburban rates has been narrowing, meaning that the recovery took place first in downtown office markets, and the suburbs lagged, but suburban markets are catching up. And this is true particularly in what you would call the big 24-hour cities, meaning places like Chicago and San Francisco. But there's another term out there now, the 18-hour city, which encompasses smaller markets, and I would add Grand Rapids to that list. So those suburban markets in the smaller cities, I think, are doing quite well compared with downtowns. So the takeaway here, the key takeaway, I mean, if you look at 2018, absorption the green bar outpaced completions by a wide margin. So there really is no overbuilding in the office market. This is at the national, the broad level. There's spot overbuilding here and there, it always happens. But broadly speaking, the nation's office market is in good shape and is prepared to weather a short and shallow downturn. Grand Rapids conditions are, I would say, even stronger. Grand Rapids has experienced 32 consecutive quarters of positive net absorption. The market is not overbuilt. And the growth in the labor force, and particularly with the millennials moving into this market, is impressive and should help propel this market, the office market, through a short and shallow, through the next recession when it comes. And I would just add, as a resident of Chicago, people in Illinois are wringing their hands. We have millennials moving in, and they're taking technology jobs and so forth. But broadly speaking, the city and the metropolitan area and the state of Illinois are all losing population. And this is in contrast to other states around the Midwest, including Michigan, which are gaining population. So there are a lot of policy issues, debt overhangs in Illinois that have to be solved. Many of those people that are leaving the state of Illinois are coming to Indiana, Wisconsin, and Texas and Michigan. The industrial market. Industrial is the strongest of the four property types, and it's been that way for a while. If you think of the woes going on in shopping centers with stores going out of business or downsizing, with malls losing anchors, such as Sears or Carson's, two big Chicago area chains, the industrial market is benefiting from that. In the form of large logistics buildings, not so much in Grand Rapids, but in the distribution hubs around the country like Chicago, like the Inland Empire, the Riverside, San Bernardino area east of Los Angeles there in Southern California, Atlanta, Dallas, New Jersey. Those are the markets which are seeing, huge million square foot or 1.5 million square foot distribution facilities. I understand that Grand Rapids is getting its first one of those with Amazon, so the local industrial market, I think, and people who work in it are to be congratulated on deals like that. Also in demand are last mile facilities, smaller industrial facilities where the goods ordered over the internet from Amazon and other providers, other purveyors, can be stored and transferred and then shipped quickly to the final destination, either the households or businesses that ordered them. So industrial is doing great. Of all the property types, it should weather the next recession most quickly. And same thing here in Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids, the industrial buildings are more manufacturing oriented or smaller distribution. They tend to be smaller, but there is a shortage of product here, a lack of inventory, which shows the tightness of the local market. Retail, we talked about that. Retail is evolving. The key here is that net absorption in every year shown in this graph, and including the next 2 years, is expected to outpace completions. Development is very conservative for shopping centers, and that is helping the retail market adjust to the new reality of more people shopping online. You can see many interesting trends. I'm sure they're going on here in Grand Rapids as well, as malls that are losing anchors are repositioning themselves. They're adding other uses. They're adding entertainment, food halls. In the case of Chicago, one of the anchors in one of the centers is being torn down, and 200 new apartments are being added on that site. So these malls that were at one time, single-use retail are taking on our different uses, and they have to do that in order to survive. And apartments, I believe we lost the title for that graph, but this shows apartments. Apartments are another success story. And let me just mention here, there's been a huge amount of new construction. If you see the blue bars here, a lot of construction, but there's been demand for those apartments. They have been filling up. People have been talking about apartments possibly being overbuilt for the past 2, 3, even 4 years, and yet those new buildings tend to fill up. So there's tremendous demand both from millennials and from baby boomers retiring and wanting a more a maintenance-free, let's say, lifestyle that apartments offer. And you see rent growth here. Let me just show you, particularly the graph on the right shows rent growth going on. And you see here growth for office, industrial, and retail rents, generally in the low single digits, with the exception of industrial. Industrial had a banner year in 2017, another one in 2018, up there around 6% average annual growth in asking rents. But generally in 2019 and 2020, we see rents continuing to go up. And again, this is in the absence of a recession. As Paul mentioned, economists are notoriously bad at predicting recessions. And There was, just in the December of 2007, which was the beginning of the last recession, the Wall Street Journal does a survey of economists. And at that month, which was the beginning of the recession, we didn't know that at that point, but it was, only, I believe, 28% of the economists surveyed said expect a near-term recession. So, that's just the nature of recessions. On the investment side, let me just end with this. Despite the fact that interest rates have gone up and we've seen a very strong investment market, demand for commercial properties on the part of investors, we've seen that for a number of years, and it's still very high. It hasn't yet receded. And I know commercial real estate professionals were talking about that, back in 2015 and 2016. Investment demand turned around so quickly in the beginning of, really in the teeth of the Great Recession. Interest rates were so low back then that investors jumped in, and almost immediately there was a shortage of investment-grade properties out there that people wanted to buy. But that level of demand has continued, and cap rates still very low. There's a little bit of an uptick here and there as interest rates have risen, but still relatively low. And I will skip that one. So let me just say once again, I think commercial real estate is in a good position on a national basis to weather the next recession. There is no overbuilding. On the investment side, there's still strong demand. So, and if it is a short and shallow recession like Paul talks about, then the industry should come through that just fine. So I wish everybody a very successful 2019, and thank you for inviting me. And let me next introduce Alex. Alex, your last name? I'll let Alex introduce himself. This is the head of Rapids Airport, and I will thank him personally for, I think I was on the only flight that got here from Chicago yesterday, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, tough facts to follow here. And yes, the airport is open for business. Our crews are some of the best in the business, and this polar vortex we consider our Super Bowl, and we are winning. We're undefeated in that regard. So thank you, Colliers and the DeVos Place, for hosting this great event and for the platform for us to talk about what we have going on at the airport. So just a little background. We are governed by an authority board, a 7-member board, Mr. Dan Korndike, board chair, as well as Floyd Wilson as vice chair, and Mr. Brian Picardi is responsible for the day-to-day operations as interim CEO. 2018, at a glance, we brought to Western Michigan $3.2 billion in economic activity. That was a study done by, I think, Dr. Isley a couple years ago. We welcomed 3.2 million passengers through our airport, and we also submitted to the Federal Aviation Administration our 20-year plan for our 3,100 acres. Our passion is to deliver an exceptional passenger experience, and our niche is really travel made easy, versus those larger airports like Chicago or Detroit. We fly to 29 nonstop destinations. We had a banner year, record year, 5 years of consecutive passenger growth. The latest routes we added were to Nashville and Savannah on Allegiant, and we as an airport have around 120 daily flights, and those flights provided by our partners here. Who's carrying the most passengers? It's Delta by 35%, followed by American Airlines and United. Load factor, which is that metric we use to gauge the health of the airlines and their health of the airport, is similar to occupancy rates or vacancy rates. Vacancy for us is only about 15%, occupancy above 80%, which is great. Airlines make decisions on where to utilize aircraft based on these numbers. Anything below 70% is where they rethink utilization. So to be above or in the 80s is great for us. Passenger trends, 5 years of consecutive growth. 16% growth versus last year, which is huge. This graph shows our comparison to the North America aviation industry. 16% is the growth we have versus 5% North America. So it's above 10%. which is huge. And we have been recognized locally and nationally. 6 months ago, we were named the second fastest growing airport in the country, and we look to be in that top 5 once the year-end numbers are in. Our overall economic impact, $3.2 billion to Western Michigan. We support and contribute to around 40,000 West Michigan jobs with a direct spend of $450 million by the visitors that travel through GRR. We are that catalyst or infrastructure or conduit, if you will, to economic activity in Western Michigan. We provide great and quality air service to the area or to the U.S., which in turn generates more demand and economic growth. As GDP and income growth rise, the demand for air service increases, and we are there to provide that platform for additional flights in passenger and cargo growth. Who helps us do this is the Regional Air Alliance, which is chaired by the Right Place and Ms. Birgit Close. They help us with touch points of the business leaders and the business community to understand where the next expansion is, where their employees are traveling to, and they help us with operating performance benchmarking, impact analysis, and with recruitment and retention of airlines. Strategic partners, we have many of them. Allegiant, you may have heard in the recent news, has announced a maintenance base at our airport. They're going to be providing $42 million in investment, 66 permanent jobs, salaries that are double the Michigan average. So we're really excited about this happening. That will happen in June of this year. Also, Delta Airlines, being our largest carrier, has partnered with the West Michigan Aviation Academy to provide grants to students to the school to fund additional aircraft, and they are an intentional partner on creating new pilots and developing that pipeline of talent. The Airport Authority has been that catalyst for our new role in economic development created in 2016. The goals set by our board and Mr. Korndike are to produce sustainable development and concepts, customer and passenger experience being a priority, as well as collaboration and relationships with the community partners. We're looking for highest and best use development, and of course that will give us increased revenue generation. This is just a sampling of the companies that do business at the airport, both local and national brands. Project Elevate is a project we'd like to introduce here. It's over $400 million in infrastructure investment. It's going to be creating construction jobs at the airport, opportunities for business. First one being relocation of the air traffic control tower, building of a federal inspection station, which will unlock additional international air service connectivity, as well as expanding Concourse A. Concourse A will be doubling essentially in size and increasing the concessions opportunities by about 15,000 square feet, which is the retail, food, and beverage offerings in the terminal. Our 20-year development summary, which was submitted to the FAA, calls for a third concourse, Concourse C, adding an additional 6 gates, as well as parking structures to the north and to the east, adding additional capacity. We are also announcing a real estate master plan kickoff this February to develop those lands that are outside the lands dedicated for runways and taxiways. We'll be doing a deep dive into each one of our sites to understand infrastructure plan, a buildable area plan, and to determine the optimal land uses of what each site can hold. Our airport has about 900 acres of developable land where each category can be supported, including a foreign trade zone of about 80 acres. I love this graphic here. It shows all of those sites for real estate development that are outside that aeronautical taxiway and runway system. We're in talks, mature talks and final negotiations for a number of sites. Site 4 on the northeast side for an aeronautical user, Site 13 at the corner of Patterson and Ustema with a hospitality developer. And we're really focused on Site 9, which is around 200 acres. It can support multiple uses. We've divvied that site up just conceptually as hospitality, innovation, as well as aeronautical. At the front doorstep, we have hospitality, and as we go through the site, we have a technology flex development, design concept, research and development, world headquarters capability, as well as industrial and manufacturing. In addition to that, there's connectivity to the runway and taxiway system for those businesses that have a flight department or a flight department essential to their operation. At the center of the site is research, development, and technology flex. We have potential for a world headquarters site with connectivity to a private hangar that goes below grade there. There's another great shot of the hangar. This is a differentiator for us because not too many sites have that connectivity to an airport or to a runway system. And here's a north shot of the area. And on takeoff, you can see the proximity of the hangars and a world headquarters site on this Site 9 with 200 plus acres. It's got some industrial / warehouse development areas on the west side of this site. We can't forget about that, which, as we hear the speakers today being the #1 kind of in-demand use, which is in this area. And we're really excited about this site. This real estate strategy project is going to help us understand what we have on the site as far as mitigation on environmental and a buildable area plan, and we're really looking forward to this project. We've incorporated design of a site experience or sustainable plan to have employees have the benefits of walking paths and a health component to the site. Our agreement structures at the airport are a multitude. We can negotiate with any type of pro forma or any business on what makes sense. We don't necessarily sell land. We usually don't do that. That requires more permitting with the Federal Aviation Administration. So we enter into long-term agreements. And there's a multitude of agreements or leases we can enter into: concessions agreements, straight land deals, things like that. Thank you.
This past year has been a phenomenal market in the industrial segment. We have leased more properties that didn't exist yet, meaning where buildings are proposed but haven't yet started construction than I can remember in my 20-year history. Currently, our market is experiencing extremely low vacancies, sub 5%. Our forecast moving into 2019 continues with that trend.
So throughout downtown Grand Rapids, we've seen the recent addition of retail kind of beginning to take shape, with first the addition of bars and restaurants. And kind of the first thing everyone was always asking was, when is a grocery store going to finally come downtown? And it's been fantastic to see both Gordon Food Service and Bridge Street Market open up and take shape throughout the west side.
We have a very active construction pipeline on the multifamily sector. In 2018, we delivered about 1,500 new units in West Michigan. Moving forward, there's about 2,500 more units proposed or currently under construction also in West Michigan. Opportunity zones are an exciting new thing for 2019, which will spur some development in some underdeveloped areas and also create some unique opportunities for investors to potentially defer capital gains.
Similarly to most of West Michigan, Holland is experiencing a lack of space, a lack of talent. All of our employers are struggling to find any employees right now. We're certainly at a peak of our current market as far as values go, both rental rates and purchase prices in the market. We've got a lot of new construction going on. GDK has a marvelous project going on in downtown Holland, a multi-use project of retail, residential, which is going extremely well. We are seeing some slowdown in activity, probably more in the industrial market than the other markets. We believe we're going to continue to have a solid real estate market in 2019.
In West Michigan, we've experienced 32 consecutive quarters of positive absorption, which is a really big deal. We've seen a steady increase in asking rates when it comes to premium downtown office space. An overarching trend that we're seeing is that Grand Rapids is very much competitive on the national level. A Class A building has to really compete. That means they need fitness, they need restaurants, they need on-site parking. And those are things that developers are listening to as they start to formulate what their building is going to look like and how it's going to compete in the marketplace.
Pretty much across the board, all areas of the industrial segment are growing in our market. The one unknown as we move into 2019 is automotive. That one, there's a lot of discussion currently with the big three and the new domestics as they shift towards electric vehicle manufacturing. How does that impact the traditional facilities that we've had here, and does it, is there a potential drop in production that would impact that segment of the market? We have found that the demand for industrial space does not correlate to job growth. We are still growing the industrial market faster than we're replacing jobs that were lost. A lot of it is just moving product, and it just happens to involve a few less people. Product distribution, for example, the new Amazon building, last mile delivery, people in this market that are manufacturing components that help with the material handling that goes inside all of these buildings.
Brick and mortar stores still make up 90% of overall sales. I think it's pretty evident in West Michigan as well too when you go down Wealthy Street corridor and see how many mom and pop shops are down there, that people like to go in there, touch the product, feel it, and enjoy it. Online is obviously making a huge presence within West Michigan and throughout the retail sector, but it's still only a small percentage of the overall sales. And we're seeing a lot of retailers being able to utilize the brick and mortar stores from not only a sales perspective, but also a marketing perspective to get their brand and get their image out there.
Affordable housing is something in our market that we've been struggling to deliver because of construction costs and land costs. And there are some developers who are tackling sort of that missing middle and lower income housing in wonderful areas of our city. ICCF, Third Coast Development, WODA Group, and a few others are really doing a great job of allowing people to continue to live in the city and be a part of a vibrant community.
When we speak about new construction, we have two different components, the pricing and the demand. While we expect the demand to continue to increase due to the lack of existing product, we do expect the pricing to level off slightly as we move into 2019. It's a very tight market for tenants and for buyers. It's definitely a landlord-seller market.
The competition for labor has gotten so fierce that now we're not just talking about executives or C-suite. We're talking about operations people, maintenance people, janitorial staff. We can't fill those positions, and so we're having to up compensation or provide bonuses, and people are cannibalizing other people's staff.
Open office environments have been a trend in the last 3 years. We're seeing a bit of a shift where it's not assumed that the open office collaborative open space is what's best for everybody. We're seeing people stop and they're reevaluating whether or not that fits best for their culture. 150 Ottawa has been a great success from start to finish. The building has an incredible anchor tenant in Warner Norcross and Judd. Chemical Bank has committed to being there, and Van Wyck Risk Solutions will be taking the entire 10th floor to fill up the whole building.
Within the next 5 years, a corridor that we really anticipate seeing some activity is the Broadmoor and M6 corridor. There should be some recent activity, especially with the Amazon addition and some handful of other residential apartment projects going on, and we're starting to see some activity begin to move out there as well. We anticipate it's still going to be a strong year for a lot of retailers. We have a lot of stores in the pipeline, a lot of activity. It just comes down to space and finding those opportunities within the market.
We deal with brokers every day coming from out of town, Chicago, New York, looking to place their tenants, their clients in Grand Rapids. Those conversations really center around a balance and how to attract their employees, what that work-life balance is, commute times. Once people come to Grand Rapids, it's a done deal. They spend one day walking around getting the feel for the city and how kind people are, and the city really sells itself.
We have some headwinds coming. 2019 is going to be an interesting year. We see it, we hear it, we feel it, but we also know we have an incredible amount of momentum being carried over from 2018. We talked last year about the fact that we have a lack of inventory in almost every sector, and that we anticipated many off-market deals occurring. Almost a quarter of all the transactions Colliers did this year resulted from off-market deals. We do have challenges, but we know this region, and we know the people here, and we know you are up for a challenge. We're looking forward to a great year. Thank you again for attending, and we wish you the very best this year.
Alrighty, my favorite part of the program, sorry to Paul and Bob and Alec, but it's our panel discussion. A lot of you have asked over the years for some of that information about what we do on a daily basis to try to keep making this great area as successful as we are here. So I've got some of my coworkers here, and we've got Cindy here joining us. I'm Mike Murray, part of the retail team at Colliers here International. I'd like to welcome Cindy here from The Right Place, Tom Postma, who is an industrial advisor in our Holland office, Scott Morgan, who's a longtime office broker here in the Grand Rapids market, joined by Steve Marcus, part of our industrial team here, and last but not least, the man with the beard, the big beard, David Rapp. He's an investment advisor right here out of our Grand Rapids office. Cindy, I'd like to start with you. If you could tell us a little bit about your role at The Right Place and what you're doing to help this community keep growing.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for having us, and thank you for all coming. It looks like the sun's coming out from what I can see. So the last 7.5 years, I've had the honor to lead Hello West Michigan, which is the talent attraction initiative here in West Michigan. Really, we do three things: attract talent, and one of the ways that we do that is focusing it on our boomerangs, those Michiganders that are those candidates outside of the area that have a tie to Michigan. And from what Paul had said and from our research, we're doing a really good job, and it's not just us, but it's everyone in West Michigan selling what we've got to offer to those people that have left and encouraging them to come back. Second, we also create awareness. So our website has over 1,000 links to resources. So all the great things that are happening in West Michigan in our 13 counties, we have that information in one place for people to take a look and see if the information about West Michigan will fit in what they're looking for when they make that educated decision whether to come back or not. And that also includes not only our boomerangs, but also our significant others that are coming with someone that's being recruited. And then third is connections. We know that Grand Rapids, West Michigan, we're a very tight community, we're very welcoming, yet people from the outside need a little bit sometimes of help to get that initial connection, so we work very hard to do that. Prior to that, I had a lot of management experience and human resource leadership experience before coming to Hello West Michigan. So in January of 2016, our organization, Hello West Michigan, decided to partner with The Right Place as a strategic partner, and we relocated to their offices 3 years ago. At that time, in addition to Executive Director of Hello West Michigan, I had received the title of Vice President of Talent Initiatives. This month, we decided to make that full-time. So I'm now the Vice President of Talent Initiatives at the right place, and someone that had been working with us, Rachel Bartels, for the last 5 years at Hello West Michigan, is now the Executive Director. So in this current role, I provide strategic direction to our overall leadership and to the organization's talent initiatives and to collaborations.
So companies in West Michigan that need skilled labor always make you aware they have positions available, or are there some you have to still go after and try to get them to?
So we don't know about all the positions that are available, obviously. From the talent attraction perspective, the people coming from outside of the area, they're probably in that 25 to 38, 40-year-old person that's coming back, that sweet spot of people, because they've made that decision, they've left, they've learned, they've grown, now they want to get back with their families when they're starting their families. So we don't know a lot about those positions, especially in the skilled labor as well. We know there's a need, and when we hear from our companies that there's a greater need, it allows us then to try to attract those individuals that have left the state, but then also collaborate with Michigan Works and other partners in the area to help skill up the individuals into those positions.
Sure. Well, it's a hot topic, the labor pool, and filling positions to keep this great area continuing to grow. Scott, in the office market, how are office users trying to attract talent? When you're out looking at space with them and trying to help them expand, are there certain things in the office world they're trying to accomplish to let talent notice?
Yeah, they really are, Mike. It's especially noticeable for some of the firms that are hiring more skilled labor, like law firms, for instance. They're really trying to move away from some of their older, Class B office buildings, particularly in the downtown situation. I'm thinking of a few that have moved out of Calder Plaza. Miller Johnson did a couple years ago. Smith Hoy did. Now you see, Warner Norcross moving out of an older building, so they're looking for something newer, more exciting, that better fits their culture, particularly the culture of the younger attorney, and a better place to attract that type of talent. So it's definitely in the forefront, but it's beyond even just the so-called skilled professions. It's also just your normal office user, like working with a smaller company out in Cascade, and their first thing they wanted to do was do a zip code analysis of where their employees are from, and most of them are on minimum wage, and they're driving, riding the bus. And they want to know, gee, we can only move so far from our existing employee kind of center node so that we don't lose these guys, because we need to have them. They're important. It's hard to replace them.
Sure. Steve, in the industrial world, skilled labor.
It's an issue out there, issue for manufacturers for sure. I mean, the skilled labor and even some of the unskilled labor. We've dealt with companies that have decided not to expand simply because they can't find the people to work in the new expansions. And the ones that are willing and able are becoming very location specific, kind of like Scott said, where if they're in the northwest side of town, they're not willing to move out of the northwest side of town because they're too scared of losing people.
Sure, and Tom, you work along the lakeshore in the industrial market. Are lakeshore companies trying to move around, trying to find those skilled labor, or is it similar to the
same with Steve? They don't want to move very far. They don't want to lose the labor force they have. I think we have a lower unemployment rate in Ottawa County than Kent County. So yeah, we have those opportunities to figure out how to grow with less workers, and I think it causes people to look at the people they have and how do I treat them better and get a good work environment.
Yeah. And as Paul mentioned, there's this balance of this unemployed labor pool that's waiting out there that either does not want to work or they don't have a skill set that's necessarily ready for where we're at right now. But there's always the retail world. And the retail world, a lot of us kind of start our working career in high school and college working in that world, and they're seeing the same constraints. You can drive around and you see the restaurants, you see open interviews and such, but the retail world can typically, we can get some of those jobs fulfilled with that remaining balance of the unemployed people out there, but there's still a shortage there as well. So the retail world keeps moving on. One of the other things that was talked about in the video quite a bit was our vacancy rates are low. They're at record lows. In the industrial world, just go build a building, but then there's some construction costs that get in the way there. You have more land to go build industrial buildings on. There's plenty of opportunities out there, Tom. Are you seeing that construction, those costs having an issue with getting those new buildings up?
Yeah, they're having an issue. I think people have to really plan far enough ahead. They need to get to work with a contractor that's a qualified contractor. You know, building today there's a lot of zoning issues, wetland issues, building permit issues, so you need to plan far enough ahead. I see a fair amount of expansion going on, so there's opportunities out there, but you need to plan ahead for it.
Sure. And Steve, around Grand Rapids here, new construction, spec industrial buildings, are there some coming up here this next year?
Yeah, it's happening. There is some specs, some partial spec where they try to lease part of it before it comes out of the ground, but construction's expensive right now. Like Tom said, it takes a long time. Labor's expensive for the contractors, materials are expensive, and by the time you're all said and done with all the hookup fees and everything, it's just a lot of money. And if you're an investor, you got to really look closely at those returns and make sure it makes sense. So
sure.
There's some, but it's not. We're not being overbuilt like Bob had said.
And Bob mentioned his slides that retail is a bit more conservative in their construction, and nothing more evident of that Beltline and Knapp with the Village at Knapp's Crossing, the Woodhouse Day Spa, P.F. Chang's is up there, Bravo, Orange Theory, Clean Juice and such, and they're getting now TJ Maxx, Old Navy's going to be building there and such, Bath Body Works. In retail, a lot of that new construction is tenant-driven, tends to have very specific requirements with their construction and their look, either whether it's freestanding or in line. So you typically need a handful of retail tenants to get that construction going there. But we're seeing record costs with retail construction and record rents because of that. But luckily, the retailers out there are making money, and so that's continuing this growth in retail that you see. Excited to see Tony in the crowd. Tony is the mall manager over at Woodland Mall, so we keep in touch with him quite a bit and understand how the regional malls are doing. And obviously there's a big expansion going on there with Von Mar. REI is under construction right out along 28th Street there, and there's Black Rock restaurants coming there. So the retail world is moving along, which leads us into the e-commerce conversation, and I know that's affecting industrial quite a bit. Steve, why don't you touch on some of the stuff happening around here with e-commerce and industrial?
Yeah, sure. It's a challenge and an opportunity both. I think for employers on the southeast side currently, it's going to be a challenge when Amazon really starts ramping up. They're going to have thousands of people employed in that site, and it's going to put pressure on everybody else around there to keep up with wages, make sure they keep their people. As far as opportunity, it's just a new way of doing business for people. We've worked with two different companies this past year. One's a preferred toy distributor, kind of taking over what Toys R Us used to do, and they leased a couple 100,000 square feet, and they're one of Amazon's preferred toy fulfillment vendors. And then there's another little company that does specialty mirrors, and they sell them primarily on Amazon, and they're expanding like crazy. So it's there's two sides to that coin.
Sure. And Tom, do you have any e-commerce industrial users over along the Lakeshore?
Yeah, I've sold 2 buildings this year, and for one example, it was a gentleman who makes wood signs that you put outside your cabin, and he sells them on the internet. And he started in his garage, went to a pole barn, and he just bought $1 million building this year for expansion. So
that's fantastic.
It gives a chance for small companies to reach the world.
Yep. So. Yeah. And we all have it, you head toward home at night, and as you're pulling up to your house, you see that beautiful brown box waiting for you on your doorstep, and you get all excited, and you can't wait to open it up and look at it. And so there's no shying away that the internet is having an effect on retail sales, but quite frankly, retail sales are up both in brick and mortar and on the internet. As we continue moving forward, those will change and adjust, but like it was mentioned in the video, the majority of the retail sales, almost over 90%, almost right around 90%, are still at bricks and mortar stores. And that requires employees, construction, and all kinds of different aspects of our economy to work together to keep that going. Dave, Paul talked a lot about different economic trends coming up. When you look at that, there's a lot of talks on the interest rates and such. What's the investment world looking like around West Michigan right now?
I would say the investment world's very healthy right now. I would say the last couple years the theme has been kind of the same, lack of product to sell. A lot of sellers are reluctant to sell because they don't necessarily know where they're going to put their proceeds if they were to sell. So we kind of have this balance of all of that going on right now. But there's definitely a steady flow of people that want to sell. I would encourage people, if you're thinking of selling in the next couple of years, to do so, because as the interest rate climate sort of changes, it definitely impacts the value of properties. And as the economy kind of does its thing, it's going to impact that overall. But generally speaking, it's healthy, and there's just a lot of buyers out there, a lot of people from regional as well as New York, California. A lot of people want to get into our market and buy things and own things in West Michigan, so that's a good, really healthy problem to have.
Good. What are you hearing when it comes to your manufacturers and their confidence moving forward? You said they're a little bit cautious on the labor pool and not wanting to expand, but at some point, if they're going to stay competitive, they're going to have to expand, aren't they, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, if you've got the customers and you've got the orders, then you have to do what you have to do to stay in business. So if that means building a new building and spending more than you want, you've got to do it. Automation is another big thing. That's kind of the other side of the labor issue. And at some point, if you just can't hire the right people, you got to make that big investment up front. But then, hopefully that's solved.
Sure. And as it was shown in the video, the consumer confidence and retail holiday sales were up again this year. And we're hearing from our retailers, both national, regional, and local, they're making money. But quite frankly, the Colliers retail team, we're pretty tired. The low vacancy and the demand from retailers and restaurants that want to be in our market, and not only the West Michigan market, we're all at Traverse City, Kalamazoo, Lansing, Battle Creek, Holland, Kalamazoo. We're out there trying to find sites, and we're successful in a lot of areas, but it's tough work because they're off-market deals. They're not necessarily just the sign on the most perfect piece of property where the retailer wants to be and it's zoned and everything's going to work. But from the retail perspective, we continue hearing great sales, sales trending upward still, and so there's a lot of confidence out there in retail. And when sales are good, they want to expand and they want us to get their sites. And with this record low vacancy, it's tough work, but that's why we show up every day. Scott, there was a great building on the horizon, and it went away. It's not there right now in Studio Park, another Class A office building. First of all, do we need another beautiful building, Class A right now in Grand Rapids? Why is that not moving forward? When will it move forward? Will it move forward?
Well, so we always need another great building, that's for sure. But that one, so you're talking about Studio Park, and they had a development agreement with Franklin Partners, which is a very successful developer from Chicago that's done a lot of great things in Grand Rapids. But it really never got off. It really, I would say, hit a brick wall because it was up against some competition. For instance, the Warner building at 150 Ottawa. The Studio Park project, when Franklin was leading that office component, they were trying to get 25% rent premium versus the competition. So I think in the video it talked about the last office deal that was done for the Warner Tower was Van Wyck Risk Management. At one time, Franklin was trying to get 25% of rent, higher rents than what Van Wyck ended up paying. So it just never got off the ground. So now actually it's going back to the original developer. They're reformulating the project. It's going to be redesigned. It's really going to be designed to meet the current market with a better economics. The same really strong amenity package. But I think it'll be very well received.
Fantastic. And what's happening in the suburban market? Are you pretty active out there? Is the whole office team? I mean, what's that kind of?
We're very active in the suburban market. Suburban market, I was just thinking about your question about, spec development and whatnot. And it's funny, I remember working in that market in the last Great Recession. And so 08, 09, I remember spec buildings being built that were 50,000 square feet just sitting there for years and years. And of course, we had partners at our company that suffered through all that. But we have not had that kind of spec development. Usually it's been, to the extent there's been new construction, it's been an anchor tenant. And you can look at that downtown, you look at that in the suburbs, that's either a big anchor that's leading the project or that's a part owner in the project. And so in the suburbs, we just have not seen a vacant building come on, or a speculative building that's been out searching for tenants.
Sure.
And I don't think that's going to change. So the suburbs are very healthy, and they're in a very tight supply, especially if you're looking for 20,000 square feet, 25,000 square feet. The options are super limited right now.
Okay. And I'm assuming the office tenants that are looking at the suburbs versus down, they typically are always a suburb type of a tenant, or are there some moving in and some moving out to the suburbs from the downtown, or where's that?
There's a little bit of back and forth. I mean, I think notably there was a tenant, Lighthouse Insurance, that moved from they really moved from an ownership position in the suburbs to downtown, and they took the old Advantage Sales and Marketing space, I think 30,000 square feet, down where Bistro Bella Vita, that building is. Bistro Bella Vita, Advantage Sales and Marketing moved out to the old Klingman's building on 28th Street, a transaction you were very familiar with.
Yep.
So it's kind of interesting to see how the buildings, changed use. You go from a retailer, and then it was dead for many years, and then it became a call center space, and the space they vacated was then taken over by a suburban office user.
Sure.
But I think sometimes the suburban users, they come downtown because they're trying to entice employees into an exciting, energetic environment with a lot of amenities, in the nearby walking vicinity.
Mm-hmm. And Cindy, when you hear this expansion and these tenants moving around, are you basically looking for the skilled labor, or are you trying to help even place the office type tenants, the attorneys that might, the firms here that need some talent, and are you working with them as well?
Right, so the knowledge worker is really the person that's probably left. They went to school, they are now starting a family and deciding to come back. But that also brings other people with them. It brings a significant other usually, or some sort of family member or child or kid. And so like when Paul was talking about, our high school graduation rates are lower, if they come back, those people are going to go to high school. Hopefully they'll go to one of our colleges, because those numbers are down too, so hopefully they'll go there. So it's all of the good things that we're hearing. So yes, I agree with Steve. There's the challenge, but then there's also that great opportunity.
Sure.
Because people outside of West Michigan, if they're from the area or from Michigan, they're hearing such great things. They're hearing about the growth that West Michigan is having. When they come home for Thanksgiving and Christmas, we host an event on Thanksgiving Eve so they can talk to employers. But the thing is, when they see the cranes and they see the excitement and they see the restaurants and they see everything that you're talking about, it gets them excited to come on back. Sure. We don't always know what we're going to get when we bring boomerangs back.
Sure.
It could be the lawyer, it could be the construction manager, the project manager. We don't know what we're going to get as we're planting that seed with people. But it's still people that want to come back, and if they're able to sell their skills that they have with what the employer is looking for with those qualifications, then hopefully it'll be a good match.
Definitely. And we do sometimes take for granted how great we do have it around here. So it is exciting when people come back and start getting that conversation going.
Exactly.
We can get wrapped up pretty quickly.
On that note, too, is we all have to do this. I mentioned early on, we didn't do this. Hello West Michigan didn't help all on its own to get people back.
Sure.
Everybody has to talk it up.
Sure.
I always ask this question: were you a boomerang? Are you born and raised and stayed? Whatever you are you talking to college students here? Are you talking to the K through 12 to tell them about opportunities here? And then on the other hand of it, if there's people that have left, are you encouraging them to come back?
Sure.
So it's great that we have all this great stuff, but we also have to start elevating our excitement about it to get those people to come back.
For sure.
Or to stay.
Yes, definitely. Staying helps too.
Staying's better.
Yeah, totally. One of the great things that we've all experienced right around our CBD here, the downtown, and Scott, you can shed some light on this. We have the growth on the west side over here across the river, as well as past the hospitals, moving east on Michigan, where you have the Gordon Food Service, new development there, and of course on the west side where you have the Myers Market down there and Bridge Street Market and fun new restaurants and such. How does that complement the downtown area? Is there anything negative? Does it pulling anybody out of the entertainment side, the restaurants in downtown going there, or is there still plenty of activity for everybody?
You looking at me?
I'm looking right at you, Scott. Yes.
Right. Well, it's funny, when I first got in the business, really the downtown was kind of the river and the Michigan Street, Fulton Street, and that was the core downtown. And suddenly Bridgewater happened, and then that was, became part of the downtown, and then the downtown started to, expand, greatly expand. And Originally, going to a place like the Brassworks building with a tenant, or going out to the Whitcomb building or Klingman's building, those were like you were going out in the front here. And it was attractive to tenants because it was free parking and it was cool loft office space with hardwood floors. But there were no amenities. I mean, there were a couple of our favorite burrito places were on the way. Yeah. But other than that, there wasn't much around there. And now they've just had this explosion of, retail and entertainment and restaurant options. And so all the Class B stuff is all filled up. So that's no longer the attractions. But all the amenities that have grown past the traditional boundaries of downtown have helped drive all this growth. And so, like a law firm like Miller Johnson goes into what they call the entertainment district, and others, tenants like the Consumers Energy, and they announce these big, exciting projects on the west side, and it's so it really has expanded the downtown base.
Sure. And Dave, you've mentioned before, we have out-of-state investors coming in to look at the product before they buy it. They're pleasantly surprised when they land at Gerald R. Ford Airport.
Yeah, everybody that comes to West Michigan always loves West Michigan. The first thing, if they're flying in, they see the airport. They love what they see, and then they start driving around, and then once they start interacting with people, they realize it's a very friendly place to do business, a place that you'd like to own real estate. I would say also when they start meeting with the municipalities and start having conversations, we have a much different climate here than the rest of the country, so it's a pleasure for a lot of people to do business here where they're trying to help people do business rather than sometimes the alternative. So everybody I interact with has nothing but positive things to say about West Michigan.
Yeah, and it's the same from the retail perspective when we get the corporate retail managers flying in here from all over the country. And we have so much fun driving them around and taking them out to dinner and showing them around Grand Rapids here. It's really an easy sales job for us. They're impressed by again, the friendliness, like Dave mentioned, of just people they interact with, and the overall climate that they see around here really gets them excited to open their more stores and restaurants in our market. And quite frankly, back to the West Side development happening over there, the downtown has its feel, has great restaurants and good entertainment spots, but the West Side has offered a different spot, a different type of a feel, a different type of a customer for people to enjoy that area as well, be next to downtown, whether they're going to go to the Van Andel Arena or here to DeVos Place for the auto show. There's just other opportunities for more people to feel comfortable coming to downtown where they don't necessarily do it on a regular basis like a lot of us do. So it can be busy and intimidating at times if you live out in the suburbs and it's just not a normal spot that you travel. So having the West Side there, having the development happening out by Michigan just brings more opportunities and excuses for people to come and enjoy this area. And we see that both those areas continuing to grow. I mean, the great thing about the West Side is, it's easy to get to. There's multiple access points from the downtown. You're not going up a big hill, and it lends itself well. It's near, our zoo and Grand Valley State, of course, and so it's a good mix. It's a good fit for what we have here in our downtown to enjoy. There was some discussion about market rate apartments, Dave. Affordable housing projects. ICCF has the Tapestry Square development. There's opportunity zones out there. What's happening in the multifamily world, both a traditional market rate apartment that could be in the suburbs to some that are downtown to some of the more affordable housing projects that are happening?
Yeah, well, multifamily has been a hot topic for a couple of years as we've seen a lot of inventory hit the market, specifically speaking downtown. And I think we just had a lot of product hitting the market all at once. And so it just takes time to absorb some of that more market rate product over time. There's only so many people can pay, X dollar per square foot. So, you start to see a little bit less multifamily product being built downtown, but I can tell you there's still, I know our office is working on quite a few larger projects downtown. A lot of them are tax credit related or some sort of subsidized product, because that's what it takes now with construction pricing in order to meet the rents that the market really will absorb right now. So there's still a lot going on, and there's still, I think, a demand for a lot of it downtown. I think there's a much larger demand in the suburbs. I've worked with a couple different out-of-state developers that have come to the market. One notably is at Knapp's Corner there, the Continental project. I mean, they've been in the market for 5 years looking for product to build kind of Class A suburban garden style product. We had a site in Byron Center that we went through a process with and then ultimately got overturned in a referendum. And then they ended up at Knapp's Corner, and they've had great success up there. They're exceeding their projections. They're absorbing that product. But sites in the burbs are very challenging to find. Finding sites that are zoned properly, that have utilities, it's challenging. But there's going to be a lot more product, I think, in the suburbs coming along the way, more so than downtown. But it's still just filling some voids of product that we need in our market.
And construction costs, though, in the suburbs, Mark Ray, I mean,
they're working through it. I mean, great. I mean, Continental's project at Knapp's Corner is a great example of it. They're not going to slow down their product. They have, a large fund, and they have to deploy their capital. So they're going across the nation. They're looking at all the data, and they're saying, well, which markets do we want to be in? Well, they wanted to be in Grand Rapids, as well as a whole bunch of other out-of-state developers, and they just deploy their capital, and they're very happy with their investment here, and they want to do another site. If we can find another site, and there's no shortage of that.
But they're building a lot of higher end stuff just because the construction costs are kind of high.
That's just the product they build. In particular, they kind of are the highly amenitized, gated product.
Sure.
But there's some other developers that we work with too that they're price sensitive to it, but your land costs and your costs to do business in the suburbs are a lot different than downtown. I mean, you can be considerably lower on a rent basis in the burbs than you can from a downtown perspective, and you can, if you look at drive times, Knapp's Corner, what does that take you, 10 minutes to get from there to downtown? I mean, you can be considerably less in rents, so it just kind of meets that need in the market.
So Cindy, there's some people in the crowd that probably need some employees. They should contact you and you can help them out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic.
Thanks.
Well, good.
Along with our partners, depending on the candidates,
Yep.
Michigan Works, West Michigan Works, other organizations as well.
We appreciate that. Thank you. Steve, Duke mentioned in the video that a lot of the industrial deals were off market, so that bodes well for the industrial team's knowledge and keeping tabs on some stuff that could move around when the rest of the market doesn't know about that.
Yeah,
right?
that's just the way the market is right now. We've got to be ahead of the curve where we know something's going to be available in 3 to 6 months, and we're already got 2 or 3 people that might want that, and sometimes you've got to figure out how to move 2 or 3 people at the same time in order to make it all happen.
Sure. And it's possible.
It is possible.
You do it.
It's difficult, but it's possible.
That's great. And Scott, the office team is watching this landscape grow downtown and maneuver around in the suburbs. And
I think you got to do the same kind of thing. You got to be planned way out in advance. So we're working with a 10,000 foot tenant right now, and they need 20,000 square feet, and they were in a sublease situation, and that sublease, I'm sure they thought to themselves, gee, that extra 10,000 feet is going to be available in that building all day long, and lo and behold, when they wanted it, they got zipped out by another tenant. They came in and leased it right out from under them. So now I've got a call tomorrow as they say we got to go to Plan B and find something else.
Sure.
So it's definitely it's tight. It's a very active environment. One thing I want to comment, Mike, earlier you talked about construction costs, and Dave, this ties into maybe the investment scenario, but the higher construction costs really translates into longer lease terms. And so we're seeing back around 08, 09, people just want to do 1-year leases, 2-year leases, very, very short term. And we've seen ahead of quite a stretch now where it's 7 years, 10 years, 12 years, sometimes 15, which, and that's still going forward. So people are very confident, tenants are confident, and that's really plays into the investment team's hands very well, I think.
A lot of the investors that come to town, they want that long-term stabilized lease in place in order to pay the pricing that the market's commanding.
Well, good. Well, thank you for that. As we conclude our panel discussion here, if you have any questions for any of the panelists, or for Cindy at the Right Place, or for any other questions you may have, please grab a Colliers professional that you know or have a relationship with here in the crowd, or you can go to our website and send over that information via the website or an email, and we'll make sure to get back to you. Just on behalf of the entire Colliers team, we appreciate you all being a part of and getting through this balmy Michigan January morning to be a part of our 19th annual Economic and Commercial Real Estate event. A big thank you to our marketing and research teams and our brokers. In a couple days, we're starting the planning for our 20th event, and so we've got a 12 months ahead of us of planning our next event this next year. Of course, a big thank you to our platinum sponsor, First National Bank of Michigan, and many thanks to our other top sponsors, Ashley Capital, Chicago Title, and Downtown Grand Rapids, Inc. We're very thankful for the Seidman College of Business and Grand Valley State University for the knowledge they bring to this event and the people they allow to come here, as well as what they bring to this great community of ours. We all want to work together this next year and make 2019 even better than 2018. So we're excited for this. We'll see you next year at our 20th event. Thank you very much for attending today.